Good afternoon or good evening. Nice to see everyone again. Missed you all. Welcome to Overview and Scrutiny for September. Let's just get straight into the agenda. Apologies.
So we have apologies from councillors Corney, Harvey and Slade.
Thank you, Becky. Minutes.
Obviously the minutes of the meeting of the Wednesday the 5th of July were attached. Is there any comments or observations, or are they happy for those to be signed off? That looks like that's okay.
Item 2, members' interests. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Declaring on item number 4 as the ward representative of Sawtry.
Anyone else? No. Okay, fine. Thank you. Item 3, notice of key decisions.
So the notice of key decisions is included within your pack. Are there any comments or questions on the items within that document? No.
Excellent. Item 4, Sawtry Village Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm delighted and giving to members, delighted to present another neighbourhood plan, this time for Sawtry. Been through due process. Examiner has been through the report, made some changes which are detailed in the report and in the appendices. And if members tonight are happy and Cabinet, then we'll have a referendum on the 9th of November. And if majority of residents are in favour of the neighbourhood plan, that will obviously then go to full council. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. As Councillor Sanderson said, it's good to have another one of these come into our panel. I think it's the third or fourth since joining, which is fantastic news for our neighbourhoods. Just talking about the Sawtry one, obviously I just want to send a massive thank you to the neighbourhood plan team. It's taken 5 years to get to this stage. I know how much work it takes to get to this point, and I know especially Councillor John Potter has spent many hours, even through some ill health of his own, to get to this stage. So I just want to say a massive thank you to those and everybody else that's helped with this along the way in Sawtry.
I'd agree, Chair, and it's no easy task to put together a neighbourhood plan, and a lot of hard work from the parish council here and from the team at Fran's team here at Pathfinder House, and really pleased that we're getting quite a number of these coming in now.
Yes, if I may just actually clarify something myself that I've mentioned. I noticed actually that there's supposed to be a conservation statement and it wasn't there. Would you, Fran, would you like to just clarify that?
Hello, yes. In the neighbourhood plan, it does mention that there is not a conservation area statement for Sawtry. This is not essential for the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan is falling back on the recently adopted Landscape and Townscape SPD, which references Sawtry and identifies particular character areas within the town, which can be used then to help determine decisions and understand the design and context of the area. That SPD also provides advice and guidance to those who are submitting applications for development to help them understand some of the requirements that they may need to consider when putting in the application and how that fits within the context of the town.
So effectively, are they going to? Do they not need then to provide this, or is it going to follow on? Or
I think that would be a decision for Sawtry Parish Council.
Okay, that's fine. I did actually notice another issue there about green spaces as well, Fran, about ownership. Do you want to just clarify that as well?
Yes, so the examiner noticed, and the responses from ourselves as Huntingdonshire District Council, that some of the landowners for the local green spaces that were proposed had not been able to be contacted by the parish. As a result of that, the examiner decided that those portions of land within the local green space that had been put forward for the neighbourhood plan should be removed to ensure that the development or the intention of the remaining local green spaces could go ahead with no conflict.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Are we happy then for any comments to go forward to Cabinet on this paper? Excellent. I'm a bit confused. Are we going to have a show of hands? Or are we stopping that?
No, we're not doing that.
Excellent. Thank goodness. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, finance. Thank you, Fran.
So I'm delighted that I have the two subject matter experts with me this evening, because having gone on holiday, I think I've forgotten everything in the finance report. So I will pass you over to their very capable hands.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I have to apologise, we're probably somewhat stale on the figures as well, because these relate back to Q1. So these are actual figures up until the end of June. But due to the reporting timelines and the break over the summer, it has taken a little while to get these reports to committee. So yes, things seem to have moved on from the figures that we're talking about at the moment. But so we're bringing to you the Q1 finance reports based upon actuals to June plus forecast to the end of the year. You'll notice that the reports this time are a slightly different format. We are reporting actual activity now in Q1. So you can start to see what we've already achieved in the year as far as funding and expenditure goes. And also it starts to give you a bit of a sense check as to how much we need to achieve in year if we're going to achieve the year-end forecast. Now we're only at Q1 at the moment, so there's still a fair amount of time to go, but this will become more relevant the further through the year we go. So it's to give you a little bit more insight and clarity into the figures. We're also showing income as well, rather than just net expenditure this time. So you get to see the income and the expenditure. Again, it's giving you greater clarity around the activities. So, for example, if we're forecasting a significant movement in the funding we receive, does that, the questions to ask is, does that also have a significant impact upon our costs, and have we reflected that through the forecast outturn? So we've changed the report formats around. We'll be interested in feedback on those, but we're hoping that it will help to give you greater clarity and encourage more questions. The Q1 forecast, you'll see the reports. We're currently predicting an underspend at the end of the year of 0.56 million in net revenue. This is driven by higher than budgeted interest receipts on our bank balances. Since we did the budget figures last year, this time last year we were starting to compile the budgets, and financial interest rates have continued to rise since that time. So we have a significant favourable variance against that. We have forecast to put through $750,000 of this into a reserve to reward staff, so additional salary payments. And that activity as to how that's going to happen is ongoing at the moment. But we have assumed in our forecast that we will put aside 750,000. It's worth noting as well, capital expenditure has picked up, particularly in relation to Markets Town programme and the associated projects within that. We're not predicting to fully catch up on the delays caused by the COVID years. So you'll see again that we're predicting our capital expenditure in year will be below what we budgeted. However, we know that those projects are externally funded, and we are very, very aware of the use-by dates on that funding, and we are still forecasting to achieve all of those. And then finally, just a short comment on commercial investments. We are forecasting a small shortfall in income on those. The Fareham projects properties are both vacant at the moment, and we have commenced refurbishment works on those. We're expecting those to be completed around Christmas time, and as well as updating the M&E infrastructure and the build fabric of the buildings, we are also taking the opportunity to change the configuration of the buildings so that we appeal more to the market down there. The market is not now for having huge buildings with I think the previous tenants had their UK call centres in there. That's not what the demand is now. So we're looking at breaking the buildings down into smaller suites, which should attract more new tenants down there. So that work is ongoing. And finally, we've appended Appendix 4, which have got the Treasury prudential indicators on there. I'm glad to say that we are nowhere near a Birmingham. Thank you. I'd welcome any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I have three small points on the revenue report and one on the commercial investment, if that's okay. So I'll take the
Just take the three.
yeah, indeed. The first question is about the interest receipts, the revision to that. Have we now assumed that interest rates are is this assuming that interest rates are staying at the current levels for the remainder of this year, and that's what's generated the 1.2 million surplus? Or have we built in any subsequent knowledge? Because clearly interest rates have gone up since the end of Q1.
Based on the current rates, so we haven't included anything for any increases yet.
Okay, so there's likely to be further upside on that number in the next report, if I read that right.
Quite possibly, yes. If interest rates continue to rise, then yeah, we have forecast prudently, so there's potential for more upside.
Okay, thank you. The second question is on the amount that's been put aside for the in-year pay award. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's based on the assumptions about the cash balances, so need to take that into account as well, assuming they're level.
Thank you very much. The second question is on the amount set aside for the in-year pay award. Is that consistent with the amount that we've heard reported in the press in the last week? Is that sufficient for that, or is there further requirement needed to put in?
So there hasn't been an official announcement from the council in terms of the final settlement on that. So those conversations are still ongoing. But what we're showing in here is the basis of the financial principles, which was around if we were to have an unexpected surplus in year, that we would then look to share that with staff. So we have set this amount aside within here based on those principles, but any amounts you may have read anywhere else outside of any official announcements from here are speculative at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Will work. So, and yeah, to come back to the specific part of your question, the options that we have put to staff and to the unions are within the affordability of the 750,000 that we've put aside.
That's very reassuring. Thank you. The third one, I see that we're £32,000 down income on the second green bin. I know you love a green bin conversation, Chair. That's about 20% down from the number that we had in the MTFS. Is there an underlying reason why these green bin charges aren't coming what we're expected? This is before we've even got to the point where we'd announced a green bin charge for next year, surely.
So the second green bin charges that went out this year only went out for 9 months worth of charges as opposed to a 12-month charge. That's to align the green bin charging next year to run from April through to March rather than being mid-year. So that explains the downturn in year. It's not, I believe, due to a drop-off in volumes.
Are there any other questions from anyone else on the revenue side before Councillor Jennings? Did you want to talk about capital? Well, can I just mention about capital? I notice actually about the underspending. I fully understand the impact of the market town. I know that we're actually on the clock on that. Are we confident about the timescales and the full spend?
We are, yes. Every month, or every 6 weeks at the MTP board, we look at the timing of the spend, and the constant question is, are we going to achieve timelines with this? We're very focused on which grant funding we're pulling down to make sure that we're using it in the correct order so we don't lose out time-wise on it.
And can I assume that's mostly the St Neots, a lot of the St Neots?
The bulk of it is St Neots, yes.
Are there any other questions there? Okay. No, did you have any? Oh, yes, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you. It's on 4.2, which has got the table with the commercial investment strategy in there. I was just interested to know why the cash investments were forecasting to come in 102,000 less than the 262 in the budget, when all the narrative elsewhere is about how interest rates and returns on cash investments is actually increasing in time.
I'm not sure on that one. I'll have to come back to you on that question. Is that okay? Yep.
If I can just ask you a question actually about the investment as well. I mean, I know Karen explained the issue about we've not got. I think is it Newport? Is it Newport? The properties of Farnham, sorry, properties there, and we're actually spending a bit of money for the investment. Are we confident we'll get the return on actually that investment? Because obviously you mentioned it's a very large unit and we're breaking it into smaller units. So is that the demand? If you could just give me a bit more clarification, Karen, thank you.
I can't guarantee we'll get the return, but this breaking it down into the 6 individual units is the best way of maximising our return from those buildings, and it's a way to maximise the rental income we'll get as well for that area. If we had left the buildings as they were, they wouldn't be meeting the increased energy efficiency standards. So we would automatically drop down onto a lower yield on those buildings. So the works that we are doing are the best way of maximising our future yield for those and making them as attractive as possible. And we've already had interest in the works. So yeah, we're trying to keep them on board for a few more months until we're completed.
That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. You kindly told us what you were doing with how to try and get the properties in Fareham relet. Can you tell me what you're trying to do to get the properties relet in the Rowley Centre in St Neots, please?
So we have 2 properties empty at the moment. We did have an interested party in the former Frankie and Benny's restaurant. Sadly, they have now chosen not to invest, so we're back out on the market for that property. The Prezzo restaurant, we're in the process of getting them to surrender their lease so that we're able to take control of that building again and put it back out to market. And marketing the 2 properties together potentially will generate greater interest than marketing them as individual properties.
Very much.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation, really. Within table 4.2, could we have the maturity dates in future for the loans, please? Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Are we happy to make recommendations to Cabinet on this paper? Oh, yes, pass the comments forward. Thank you. Okay. So, item 6, corporate performance report. I have to say, quite a change in the model.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm sure you've all noticed, and as promised at the last meeting, we've changed the format of this report to make it more understandable, which I hope you agree. Dan's just going to take us through some of those changes and do a quick presentation with your permission before we get onto the proper scrutiny part. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Members will be aware that we have a new 5-year corporate plan. It sets out the priorities and the outcomes for the council. I'm not going to go over those again. We've got 65 actions in the corporate plan. This is the first quarter we're reporting on those. They cover what we said we'll do ourselves, what we're going to support to enable others to do, and the things that we're going to influence, matters that are outside our direct control, that do enable influence that's running through what we're doing nowadays. Then we also have a set of performance indicators focusing on how well we're doing in delivering key services. That doesn't cover everything the council does. There's a layer of performance data and monitoring that goes on below that at service level. One of our corporate plan actions this time was, as Councillor Ferguson just said, to refresh how we do performance management reporting, improving transparency and tracking what we're doing and how well we're doing it. And the new report format we've produced, which we previewed with you in June. I just thought it'd be useful to take you through that briefly. Just as a reminder before I do that, these reports are the quarterly reports focused on our own performance. In the corporate plan, we talked about contextual outcome measures as well, where we're going to look at monitoring the progress of the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve. Those are things that are, again, outside our direct control. So we won't be setting targets for those, but we will be looking to monitor and report on those. Which we don't want to be holding ourselves to account for things that aren't within our control, such as the state of the economy, things like that. So if I could go to the next slide, please. You'll have seen in the report that we've split it into 4 main sections. The main report now features a written summary from each of our from the directors responsible for each outcome. There's also a summary section on performance with the pie charts and the tables breaking down how we're performing across the actions, performance indicators and projects. And then those projects, actions and indicators are listed for each outcome with the status given. And so hopefully this is a useful summary of where we are on each outcome that allows you to see where things perhaps not as on track as in other areas. And you can use that hopefully to then skip to the detail in some of our other reports. If I could have the next slide, please. This is a Appendix A, which focuses on our actions. It looks very similar to what we've reported previously. What the one difference is that we've got an extra column in there looking at the impact of the action on our outcome. So a bit more detail on impact. This is a Q1 report, so we're perhaps a bit early to be reporting on too much impact. A lot of planning work is still going ahead this quarter, but hopefully as we go through the year, you'll see a bit more detail of what difference these actions are making to our residents. Could I have the next slide, please? This is probably the biggest change to the report. We've gone from a table format for our performance indicator reporting to graphs. The idea with this, it was based on the feedback we were getting from yourselves and others, that the previous table was, some people found it hard to understand. The idea with this is it's not only simpler, but we've also got more information showing in each graph. So where previously you would have only had the end of the quarter data, the figure as at the end of June. You've now got that broken down for April, May and June. We've also been able to show the target line and the intervention line, the green and the red there, with the amber, any amber results being where the results are between those lines. I appreciate these might not be too easy to read where performance is very close to the line, so we've color coded the labels, so you'll see if it was amber, it's an amber color rather than a green or a red. We also have the previous year's data shown on here. That's the grey line that's tracking through there. So you hopefully at a glance you get an idea of how we're performing compared to last year as well as compared to our targets. And then we have commentary from the service, and probably a key focus here. And at the bottom right, we have the forecast from the service where they expect to be at the year end and the status based on the target and how that figure compares. So that will help us understand how we're going to, whether we're on track to meet the target this year. And I think my final slide, thank you. This relates to progress on projects. These are collated by our project and programs team, and they're taken to a different board within the council from our actions for review. That's why they've been separated out. Actions delivered as projects have been included in this section rather than in the action report, for that reason, and to sort of enable a clearer focus on some of those projects which tend to have, more complicated, they have a bigger resources generally, and perhaps delivered over a longer timescale. Feedback on whether that works would be useful for us. I appreciate when you're reading the Appendix A on the actions, it perhaps is a bit disjointed, going from action, and then please see the project report. So views on that would be appreciated. But I don't know if we want to take any questions on the format now, or whether I can hand over to Councillor Ferguson, who can give you a briefing on the Q1 performance.
Councillor, we'll take the briefing from Councillor, and then we can ask questions afterwards, if that's okay.
So I'm not well, I am a consumer of this report, but I'd like to thank Dan, and I think Emma is also in the audience, for all the hard work that's gone into this as well. I really enjoyed the narrative element of it from officers as well. Things are a lot clearer for me, at least. And the graphical time histories, I think, help to show sometimes where we've dipped below. It's just a variance issue rather than, and the long-term trend is good. So I think, yeah, my understanding of these performance indicators is much higher than it is normally. Previously, I spent many hours trying to wade through the report, trying to understand what's happening. I think it's improved, but that's for you to decide. In terms of the actual content of the report, I think it's generally a very good performance. 3 issues or 3 ambers that I think perhaps I noted as concern. PL2, the number of one leisure facility admissions, which is below our target, still higher than last year, but I think that's something we need to keep our eye on. And in my portfolio area, PL3 and PL4, which is about the time it takes to grant and implement disabled facility grants. I talked at length about this at full council. There was a question, I think, from Councillor Harvey about the problems we've been facing with places for people who are our biggest provider, and we're one of their biggest customers. That issue is being resolved due to it being elevated to our senior leadership team, who've done a good job in mending that relationship. And I think Places for People have agreed to improve their performance in the future. In terms of really good performance, again, in my portfolio area, not that I'm biased, but PL5 and PL6 were always rather embarrassing for me, which were to do with the time taken to process new housing benefit claims or changes of claims. Those were heading in the wrong direction for a long while. I challenged Katie Kelly, our Revs and Ben's manager, to fix them, and she's done that. So those are both green now as well. So I think that's an excellent performance. And of course, which has been a bugbear in the past, still continues to be challenging, PL 12, 13, 14 and 15, especially 15, to do with planning and addressing that planning backlog, which has been a problem for us. Those are all green now, and I think that's excellent performance. So thank you to the people in the planning team and Councillor Sanderson for excellent performance. So that's my report. I welcome your scrutiny.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was looking at PL 21, Councillor Ferguson. I'm slightly concerned that the percentage of calls to the call centre, the number of calls that we're now answering, is considerably lower than it was at the start of the year, and yet we still state that the latest projected outturn status is green. I'm not so sure that that is correct. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So I have regular meetings with Michelle Gray, who runs that team as well, and it's simply an issue with staff retention and some illness in the team, and we don't have enough people at the moment. So the reason why they're optimistic they're going to recover performance is they've recruited some people and they're going to train them up. But if we don't have enough people because people leave, then it's difficult for us to answer calls. I think the performance is still adequate compared to almost every other service that you have to ring up. But yeah, it's definitely a cause for concern. But if we don't have people answering calls, for a wide number of reasons, then performance will be expected to be dropped. But I think that's a problem we have in hand, and so I'd expect to see it recover later in the year.
Dan.
Just to add to that, I think you can see from the performance, the grey line for last year, we were achieving 90% for much of the year. If the team fills those vacancies and gets back to that, then that dip to 77 could easily be rectified. This is something that will be continued to be monitored throughout the year, and you'll see the results of Q2.
All I was thinking though, really, I can see that the projected status should be green at the end of the year, but I think we should, if we're being honest with ourselves, we ought to say it's at an amber situation currently. That's all I would prefer to see, so that we are highlighting the fact and the reasons why that Councillor Ferguson has stated. I think that's what we just need to be all aware of, so that we can see if there are improvements throughout the rest of the year, as we hope there will be through staff getting more staff.
So we went to some lengths to define the criteria which things drop to amber status, but I do agree with you. The point of having an amber status is when things start to drop, we can be aware and we can focus on, as we did with the council tax support issues I identified, and with planning as well. So yes, kind of that's the point of having a warning light, isn't it? Is that we can see when things are starting to decline. So I do agree with you.
So will we take that on board and obviously make some changes accordingly on that, Dan?
I think we can probably add the current status as well as the outturn. I think the outturn is most relevant to the targets you've set for the year. But I think we haven't hidden the amber status as it is identified in there, but I think it could perhaps be added more up front as well.
Yeah, fair point. Any other questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. You touched on the One Leisure admissions, and it's great to see the admissions are up on last year. But I was wondering if you could just give a bit more detail about why they are below the target that we've set, and why it is that we expect to catch up by the end of the year, more or less, anyway.
So this is outside my portfolio area, but what I would say is that variance is a thing, and if you dip down in one quarter, I think we need to average out over a longer time period. Same thing again. It's an amber sign. Need to look at it. We need to consider it, but I think that's a question for Councillor Taylor, and so I can ask on her behalf and ask her to write to you if you like, because I don't have the answers. But I think fluctuations are a thing, and sometimes we have to. Sometimes they'll be higher, sometimes they'll be lower. But if it's a trend, then that's when it becomes a problem.
So the details we got for this report are set out here from the service. However, I know from the July report that we've had that they've referenced the competition locally, increased competition compared to when they set this target. So they are forecasting to only be 2% below the year-end target. They are intending to improve, but results are higher than last year. It was a high target set and linked to the financial budgets for the service.
Yeah, I understand, of course, that there's going to be variation through the year, but I just wondered why there was the particular confidence that we would recover from being 6.5% below to only being 2%. I mean, I appreciate they're small numbers, but they're quite precise, and so there must be a reason for them being that precise. So I just wondered what the factors were that were leading to that sort of increased confidence.
The answer is I don't know, and I'll have to ask Councillor Taylor to write to the panel if that's okay.
Councillor Blackwell.
Well, if I can just, thank you. If I can just share some local knowledge in Huntingdon, the Sports Direct gym is closing this week. And from my conversations with the One Leisure team have been fantastic. There's an enormous amount of interest, members moving to the One Leisure gym. So I think, a one-off event may certainly change course for One Leisure for us. Thank you.
Which is probably a good news for a One Leisure point of view, but bad news for the business themselves, and probably bad news for our rates unless they can relet the unit. And I think there's also rumours of another gym operator opening in St Neots in the Bills unit as well, which is, it's a deeply competitive area, isn't it? And it's something we have to respond to. So, yeah, it's part of the game of being in the gym business, I guess. And so it's something we have to be aware of. So I'll get Councillor Taylor to respond to those points.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment really about the format of the report, which you asked about, and it's the overall summary report. I was just a little bit confused by some, and I hesitate to use the example I've picked because I understand that the managing director may have written himself, but it's not a personal. A personal gripe about this particularly, but I found a lot of the bits that were being written as the intros didn't really take account of any of the performance indicators or any of the RAG ratings that came later. So, for example, I take keen interest in the Market Towns programme, and there are 2 amber ratings on the Market Towns programme, but none of this. If you read just the piece that prefaces it, it just sounds like, the Market Town programs continue to work. It's innovative. There's no reference to the fact that they've picked up that there are building material supplies concerns about budget allocations, construction schedules, and all the things that have come further down in the report. So it just felt that a lot of them were being they just didn't seem to flow onto any of the concerns that they're only picking up the plus side. But I don't know whether that's intentional or.
I think that's fair feedback. So I think we'll take that on the chin. Obviously, this is the first time this has been around. It's very much trying to focus, that opening statement is trying to focus about the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And I think the fact that when you scroll down to page 2, you absolutely see that there's 3 ambers. But I think that is absolutely fair feedback, and we'll consider that in the drafting of those overall statements, going forward. So thanks for that.
Councillor Morton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just looking at planning at the moment, I know from my residents, I'm still getting a lot of concerns, a lot of problems popping up. And reading PI 15, it says that planning applications over 26 weeks with no current extension in place. What I think would be useful for me and for us to see is how many planning applications have got an extension, how long that extension is, and the reasons for it. We could currently have 120 that meet this criteria, but we could have another 300 that are over 26 weeks and have an extension period. It'd be useful to find out from my point of view what extensions are out there, why they've been given, and updates on those as we go along as well, rather than being missed out the report as they are at the moment.
What I would say to that is that extensions of time are routinely used in planning, not just here, but all councils, and that they wouldn't be put in place without the agreement of the applicant. So these haven't been forced onto or done without their knowledge. I don't know. I'd have to check whether it's possible to report on those in the same way we are with this indicator. I'm sure we can get, if we can get data, we can provide something back to you.
What I can say, Councillor Martin, is the planning are due to come to this committee in October to lay out in extreme detail the situation with planning and go through all of that. So that's absolutely a question that you can ask. As Dan outlines, it is fairly standard practice. And the only thing I draw attention to is we were really clear about some of the challenges and concerns in planning. As far as I'm aware, we're the only council in the country that publishes this kind of data. So it's not to say that this situation is where we want it to be, but it's absolutely to enable you to ask questions and provide the scrutiny that you just have. And I think the October session will give you even more chance to do that.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. With regard to the layout, I found the layout to be easier on the actual screen than it actually is on here, where you'd got the outcomes down one side, the bit in the middle, and there. If we could have had that on the screen rather than having to keep scrolling up and down, would have made trying to reference everything, I felt, would have been much easier than, as I say, going up and down. So that was just a comment. Perhaps we can think about that further down the line. And then with regard to PL13, which again is planning, but I will ask the question now. So we see that there's quite a considerable, it's about a 7% drop. It has improved, but it's still 7% lower than it was the previous year. I'm just wondering where we've got percentage of planning applications processed on target, are we including within those figures applications that have been withdrawn by the applicant because they cannot make amendments to the planning application? Now we don't take amendments, so I'm just wondering whether that skews your figures or what. So that is a point I would like somebody to come back to us and say what's occurring there really.
Can we table that for the October session as well? That would be very useful. It's a fair point, and I mean I don't have the understanding, so I think it's absolutely the sort of question we should be answering. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. My question next one is on more of a technical understanding question of how first of all, I love the graphs. I think they're really, really helpful. And I hadn't picked up that the colours of the actual results were already colour coded, which equally, I think, as time goes on, will be very useful. If I take PI 18 as an example, which is litter, detritus, and weed accumulations, I guess it's a conceptual question, really. If we start the year in green and then we have, say, over the summer, we hit red for 6 months, but then because in March all the weeds have died off and it's clear again and we hit 90, does that make it green for the whole year? Because clearly we're looking at the green outturn status, which is the status at March, but it's no good if everything was clean in March and it was really bad for the rest of the year.
It would, yes. We're looking at a cumulative total for the year here, so we've set ourselves a target of 80%, not sorry, 90% for the whole year. There is a possibility. I mean, we're going to report the results month by month, but if it were red in the summer, it could recover and then be reported as green.
I just make the point that these are arbitrary targets and figures, and if we saw that sort of performance, it doesn't matter if the indicator says green. If the graph drips down into the red, I think that's worthy of comment as well. So it's a good point, and it could be this is a work in progress. Happy to, if the targets are wrong or they're not measuring the right thing, then I think we need to adapt them. But for the time being, when we see that sort of behaviour happening, it's worthy of comment, and I think perhaps we can change how we measure things after that. But thank you for pointing that out.
It's a really good question, Councillor Jennings. So there are a number of these indicators which have a kind of quite a high degree of seasonality, and what's happened historically, the classic one would be recycling rate. So what we see is recycling rates classically go up in the summer because people are mowing their lawns, and particularly if you look at the impact of like World Cups, the amount of glass collected from people's curbsides goes up quite dramatically. So with this, what you can see is that seasonal curve. Whereas historically, what we've seen is just a flat number for a quarter, and then people are like, well, why is it down or why is it up? Whereas actually, it's an expected seasonal spike. So you should be able to see those much better, and hopefully over time, our forecasting will improve, in line with that as well.
If I might actually comment as well, I mean, I like the change. I like the format that we're actually moving to. I think it's clearer to understand. I think it's early days. I think that it's iterative. The whole process will be iterative, and we'll actually learn from it. I mean, I did read all the reports, and I did struggle with actually marrying all of them together because I still felt I was still reading an awful lot of data rather than it being concise. But that might actually just be me. I actually fully accept that. But I think it's actually moving in the right direction. Councillor Pickering.
No, just I'd say I completely agree with that. I think the reports are brilliant. I love, as others have said, I like the narrative, but I did think we could still combine the detail into the summary sections. I think because I still felt like we were reading the same thing twice, because you read it linearly, it's quite hard to read it as a PDF, from here down to then find the page where the detail is. So I think if we can merge the summary with the detail, then that would save us reading everything twice.
I fully accept this isn't easy, and we're actually moving to a completely different performance model. So I think it's huge credit to you and the team that's actually this has happened and it's actually changed. So I think it's great that it's an excellent first step, and obviously just iterative, and we'll learn and feedback from this committee as it moves forward. Are there any other questions or comments on the performance? Okay, and we're happy to all the comments go forward to Cabinet. Excellent, thank you very much for that. Oh goodness, we're now on to item 7, overview and scrutiny work programme.
So obviously the work program's here. I don't know if there's any comments on anything that's within that, but I was wondering if there were any items which the panel would like to bring forward to potentially look at over the coming months to be added to the work programme, or whether that's something perhaps you may well like to have a think about, and you can always email me after the meeting if something hits you with clarity. It's just that I'm conscious that the work programme for this panel particularly doesn't have anything current on it, and I'm conscious that you would probably like it to. So if there's any suggestions on areas that you would like to look at, and certainly we will contact officers and see if there's anything that they feel that would be helpful to have ONS involvement in. We'll obviously bring it the other way as well. But if there's anything that any of you can think of that you would like to look at, please do let me know so that we can further develop some of these working groups and add some in.
Thank you, Becky. I mean, I think there are several areas that we perhaps could look at, but it's keeping it within the boundaries of obviously performance and growth, and bearing in mind that it's got to be practical as well as we can do. But I would appreciate any comments or any areas that you find helpful. Please, by all means, feed it back to Becky on that. Thank you. Well, unless there are any other issues, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.